I didn't really know where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do. And, when I was in college, I went to the University of Rochester. I just studied whatever I thought was interesting. And so at the time that was psychology and the Spanish language. And I went and studied abroad. That changed my life. I really fell in love with international culture and languages. But when I was graduating, I started to ask myself, what am I going to do with Spanish and psychology? And as it were, one of my friends was going to interview with a company called Anderson Consulting, which is now Accenture. And this was in the late 90s when they couldn't really get their hands on enough people. And he said, hey, they're interviewing hundreds of people. You should just come. I'm sure they'll talk to you. So I said, yeah, okay, fine. And I went, and sure enough, they were interviewing hundreds of people and they agreed to speak with me. It was like one of these rapid fire 20-minute interviews. I was sitting outside and talking to some of the people that worked for Anderson Consulting and saying, hey, can you tell me about this person that's going to interview me? And they said, yeah, he's an associate partner and he's in the New York office and he works out of Chicago right now and he's on a utilities client. And so I got all this intel on this person. And when I went in for the interview, I remember he said, hey, Lashman, so before we get started, do you have any questions for me? So I said, well, sure. My understanding is if I get this job, I would be in the New York office. Can you tell me a little bit about that culture? And he says, oh, yeah, he told me about it. And then I said, well, it sounds like you really like New York. I mean, how do you feel being in Chicago all the time on this client? And he looked at me kind of like, what's going on here? And so he answered that question. And I was like, so what got you interested in the utilities industry? And he went on and on. And suddenly he looks at his watch and he's like, hey, man, 20 minutes is up and I haven't even asked any questions, but don't worry, you're good. And then I went through all the interviews. Bottom line, I ended up getting the job, which gave me the opportunity to learn all about technology.
Catch the full episode of the Whisking It All podcast by clicking the link in our bio.